Now let's talk about revelations that Foreign Minister Penny Wong snubbed Israel at a UN summit last year, where she pushed hard for a Palestinian state as well as ceasefires in Gaza and Lebanon. Senator Wong, in fact, failed to meet with Israeli representatives, but she did manage to meet with Iran and the Palestinian Authority. Nick, this really is appalling, but sadly not surprising. There's a pattern with this government.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's hard to pick out one thing of all the things that have gone wrong under the Albanese government, which is the most troubling. But for me personally, and I think possibly for Australia, the change in policy towards Israel is dramatic, worrying and frightening. We've been allies with them, natural allies, really since the formation of the country. And right at this stage, they're a perfect country to be in a military alliance with, because they're very good. They're very good at making themselves into a small, very prickly country that is very difficult to attack. So I think this is just stunningly disappointing. I did think there might be some nuance in their policy towards Israel, but clearly not. It's quite clear from Wong's behaviour that she actually does think that Israel doesn't have any right to exist. And for all their pretense about a two-state solution, they're really on the side of a one-state solution, aren't they?
Well, even with a two-state solution, Michael, how is that viable? How is that even possible? It seems to be some sort of a delusional fever dream of the left now, because you look at who runs Gaza. How is a two-state solution possible there?
Well, it's very difficult to see at the minute. I mean, you can't have Gaza as part of the Palestinian state if it's going to be run by Hamas. And even the Palestinian Authority have had a shocking record in the West Bank. So this is why a lot of people say it's too early at the minute to keep supporting the motions of the UN about a two-state solution when no one's got any idea where the two states would be, nor who would run them, nor who would fund the reconstruction. So Penny Wong has been the most hard-left, extreme left foreign minister Australia's ever had. She's been very critical of the Jewish state, Israel, in so many ways. And as we know, notoriously, if you think it was bad enough, Rita, that when she was at the UN, she met the Iranian foreign minister, but not, as you say, Israeli officials. When she was in Israel last year, she refused to visit Nova, Nir Oz, Kfar Aza, places you've been to, places I've been to. The foreign minister of this country went to Israel 3 months after this shocking slaughter by these Hamas scum, and she refused to visit the sites of Jewish trauma, of Jewish execution, of Jewish murder. It was an appalling act by the foreign minister, and what she did in New York is no great surprise to any of us. Don't forget, this was the foreign minister who the day after October 7 said Israel, the Jewish state, should show restraint. The Jewish state should not go into Lebanon, she said, because we don't want another Gaza, she said. Don't go into Lebanon. Well, you know, her record has been, quite frankly, disgusting, and she's brought great shame on our country, unfortunately.
Now let's talk about the Albanese government being urged to review how taxpayer-funded arts grants are being awarded amid accusations that they're being spent on producing content that promotes hate, anti-Semitism, terrorism and extremist ideologies. This follows revelations that musician Fred Leon, who's on the government's payroll with many others, has called supporters of Israel's the C word, call them scum, encouraged people to boycott Zionist artists, as he puts it. There needs to be some accountability, Nick. When we're talking about taxpayer dollars, the arts community is entitled to think what it wants, and their way of thinking is often pretty rotten, but our taxes shouldn't be funding it.
Yeah, I always love these stories where the government is urged to do this or urged to do that. And generally the government actually doesn't take a blind bit of notice, and this government won't. You know that. You know, if they're not going to tackle something as easy as arts funding, if they're not prepared to tackle anti-Semitism more broadly or the behaviour of police outside the Opera House, so we can forget it. But I think that the real message here is for Peter Dutton and his team, that they should see there is immense public support for cutting back some of these sacred cows, and let's not forget our friends at the ABC, and they should also look to what the Trump administration has done in the States, which is to end wokeness by following the money trail and cutting off the money supply, because so many of these things are directly or indirectly funded by you and I, taxpayers. So I think there's a great model for what's happening in the States, for what we can do here. And I would very much hope that Peter Dutton and his team are looking at going the same route when they're in. Just stop giving these idiots money.
Well, the Trump administration, the Trump campaign, Michael, was very clear about their goals about cutting this waste, tackling the activism in the bureaucracy, getting rid of these taxpayer-funded programs that really don't serve the taxpayer. Does Dutton have that sort of appetite? Because we're not hearing much rhetoric in that area at the moment.
Well, I think so. Claire Chandler, don't forget the Shadow Arts spokesperson, was the person that raised the issue of these two Palestinian, I'll say, sympathisers going to the Venice Biennale on behalf of our country when one of them, the artist, had posted a number of extremely dubious, had performed a number of, or created a number of extremely dubious artworks which seemed to glorify terrorism. That would be one interpretation of it. Look, the answer is this, Rita. Why are governments in Australia and elsewhere funding left-wing activists? If they want to be left-wing activists, fine, but don't get money from the taxpayer. And this Creative Australia gets $289 million a year from the federal government. They've got 149 employees. The average salary, they spend $21 million on salaries. The average employee gets $140,000 a year to dole out grants. And what we see is a level of anti-Semitism like which we've never seen in the arts community before. Why? And through some brilliant reporting from the Australian newspaper, we see, Rita, that a lot of these artists are sitting on committees giving grants to each other. On the one day they're a recipient, and then months and months later they're sitting on a committee giving grants to other people. There appear to be serious conflicts of interest at Creative
The lunatics are running the asylum, Michael.
Well, I heard...
They're using our money to do it.
Yeah, correct. I certainly hope that the Dutton government cuts off any funding to left-wing activists, particularly the racists and anti-Semites that we see in this country, many of whom seem to be receiving money from the taxpayer. Well, let's hope that ends immediately.
Let's hope. Let's get the latest now from Climate Change and Energy Minister Chris Bowen. He's become almost a full-time Insta-influencer. His output is prolific. This time he's telling us he's, a Brisbane Lions fan, and he's spruiking how solar panels are going to halve their power prices.
Well, the Brisbane Lions are cutting their electricity bills and their emissions. Today, we're partnering with the Brisbane Lions. New batteries here, solar panels on all the roof. The Lions will cut their electricity bills by half and will reduce emissions as well. What's good for the planet is good for your pocket. That's true for households, it's true for countries, and it's true for footy clubs too.
Nick, if they're halving their bills by employing these methods, why are my bills skyrocketing? All these renewables haven't really done much to lower my power bills. I don't know about yours.
It's a mystery, isn't it? And I suppose, these are perfect. These must be very cheap to put in, presumably, because otherwise, how would you possibly make your bills half the cost if you're having to spend tens, probably hundreds of thousands of dollars for all these solar panels and batteries? So it's a kind of magical thing, isn't it? I do worry though about Chris Bowen. He's probably got the most technically complex portfolio of any minister in this government. And he's got one of the most devilishly difficult problems to fix, which is giving us reliable electricity when they're closing down coal-fired power stations at enormous rates. And he somehow finds time to go off and be a TikTok video influencer, whatever they call themselves.
Well, he's a bit of an Insta influencer these days. He loves the camera. He loves just trying to go viral. And the output, it may be prolific, but I've got to say the quality has not improved. We've run out of time. Nick Cater, Michael Kroger, thank you so much for your time tonight.